I realized I forgot to say two things. One is that our meeting today will be an hour and a half long. If you need to leave the top of the hour, please feel free. So sorry. And then also that we'll be recording this meeting and we'll be posting it on through our blog on the clicktoengineering.org website for those who weren't able to attend today or for you to refer back to in the future. All right. Apologies, Scott and Smirla and Gina. Sorry.
No problem. I also just wanted to acknowledge that Viviana Lopez Burgos is here, who is also a core member of our team. Hello, Viviana. So if we have any tough questions, we'll just pass them off to Viviana.
Sure, I'll be here ready to answer.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead. We have a little bit of a warm-up activity just to get to know each other a little bit better. This is going to involve turning on your camera if you can, but we also understand people are doing lunch, life is happening, so if you can't, you can also type into the chat. So I'll pass it off to Smirla.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, so like Scott mentioned, we like to start these meetings just to kind of warm us up a little bit and start our gears going. And you're probably familiar with word clouds. For a while, they were like the rage in education, right? Like there are programs that you can have word clouds everywhere. Well, we're going to do a low-tech version of a word cloud for our warm-up activity. And so we wanted for you to take a couple of minutes. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to think about what do you think when we say the term engineering? So what words do you think of when you hear the word engineering? And so I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And if you could grab a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil and take a few minutes to write down a response. And then when I say go, we're going to show it on the camera and see what terms come up. If you don't have a pen or paper available, you are more than welcome to use the chat. And you could imagine maybe the Jeopardy theme going on. I wish I had it cued so we could go doo 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 doo. But I actually can't sing. So just imagine that and you're writing your little words there. So we'll do 2 minutes.
I don't know. That was pretty good, Smirla. Now you've outed yourself as a Jeopardy.
Oh, I mean, I love game shows. Please don't get me started. I want to be like Vanna White, but the Latina version of Vanna White.
And like Jeopardy, if you can write kind of big on your paper, then we can see it when you can hold it up to the screen and we'll pretend it's creating a word cloud.
Yes. Oh, that's perfect. Courtney, I think that's the right size of font you use there. Bring out your Post-its. Man, I wish I had the cued sound. It probably would have made less awkward.
We'll work on that next time.
Yeah.
I'll have the
Maybe we
music.
should take turns humming the song.
Now is the time for jokes, right?
I'm prepared. Okay. Are we ready? We have like 30 seconds.
I mean, this is a pretty in-crowd group about engineering, so
I can't wait to see what words are gonna come up. Okie dokie. Well, if you're ready, you can grab your piece of paper, show it on the screen. We'll see what it says, or you can write on the chat. Say helping people, hands-on contraptions. I love that word. Building things, process, collaboration, empowerment. That's wonderful. Using science, math, and technology, building. Yes, math. I see models. Perfect. Thank you. These are wonderful. Becky has a bunch in there. Becky, you have like a concept map. I love that. Like a different version of a word cloud.
I made my own word cloud.
Yes. Oh, this is lovely. Yes. Okay, let's see. There's something in the chat. Engineers help people, math, technology, solving problems, making the world a better place. These are all excellent. And so this is wonderful because we're already kind of getting into the mindset of what engineering means to us. And what you'll see today throughout the presentation and the workshop is that when we start talking to families, families have different ideas about what engineering means. And sometimes engineering doesn't necessarily bring out super strong emotions compared to like math. Like if we ask folks about math, some people are like, oh, math, I remember failing my 9th grade exam or whatever. And so engineering with families, they start thinking about building and construction. Some families have engineers in their family, family members and engineer, and so they might have some conceptions about what that is. And then as we're going through experiences with the program and talking about engineering, families start thinking about how engineering connects to their everyday lives. They see themselves as problem solvers. They're all constantly solving problems and connect to engineering that way. So this is just like a warm-up exercise to get us started to think about what engineering means. And then through Scott and Gina, they'll show us a little bit more about what families are saying.
Thanks, Mirla.
Mhm.
And that's a fun one to do with families, kind of before and after program too, and see different connections that folks are making. So we have some more activities we're going to do together, but before we do, we just want to share a little bit more background with you all about some of the projects we've been working on, give you a sense of kind of the context we've been working in. So we're just going to share a few slides. We promise we won't share too many. So there's a couple of projects that we've been working on in the last few years that this work is informed by. The one I'm going to talk about is called Head Start in Engineering. This is a partnership we've had with Mount Hood Community College Head Start since about 2014. So again, we're working primarily with the young kids, and in this case, through the Head Start program, which is most of you know is a national free preschool and family engagement program that has sites all around the country. And we've been working with them to develop engineering learning experiences for Head Start families with preschool age children. And more importantly, our big focus, especially in the last 5 years, has been what is equitable engineering education look like, and how do we push our ideas about engineering with the input from staff and families. The program has primarily been in Spanish and English, but the last couple of years, we're also working to provide more resources for Arabic-speaking families and better connect with those communities. So that's a way that they've been stretching us and our capacities in ways we've been thinking about the work. So every year, we work with Head Start to facilitate about a 6-month family engineering program, which includes take-home activities for families and kids, workshops for those caregivers and parents to support that at-home work, online resources, including recently we've been working with ways to help parents and caregivers connect with each other online, and then teacher professional development for the staff we're working with at Head Start. And then usually we end the year is fun with a visit to the local science center, in this case, the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, which has been a partner with us for many years. But that's something, and we've had like the whole Head Start program come, so hundreds of families and staff, which has been a great celebration at the end of the year. So through that process, we've been partnering with families to research the ways they engage with engineering, and also how that leads to long-term patterns of interest and engagement even after the program ends. So we've tried to stay connected with families a year or even 2 years after they've ended the program and see how those ongoing interests and engagement with engineering have evolved. So just as an example, and we'll talk about this more later, but this year in the research, we focused on particularly exploring the program design elements that have been most impactful for families in a broad family-centered program like this. So we'll talk about that, the things that they've most connected with in terms of those program design elements and the way engineering has been presented. And then we've also been closely looking at how the goals and interests that families bring with them are critical for shaping the programming experience and the long-term interest pathways. So that's another connection to the warm-up we did. It's been really powerful for us to better understand what family goals they bring with them to these engineering experiences, how those evolve over time, and how they connect their goals to the engineering content that they're experiencing with the program. So that's Head Start in Engineering. I will now pass it off to Gina to talk about another program we've been working on.
Thanks, Scott. So I am very lucky because I get to talk about the Ready, Set, Go engineering program. And this is a project that's a partnership with Metropolitan Family Service in the Portland area. And in particular, they have a program called Ready, Set, Go. And so, you know, the name is really creative because we just tacked engineering on at the end of it. But Ready, Set, Go is this really unique context. It's a program for families with young children, and they have this thing called a parent-child interaction group. So they bring a parent and child together and just invite them to play and engage with activities. And then there are also structures for parents to talk with each other in a peer group and with the Ready, Set, Go educators about parenting issues. So it's this really great program that kind of really aligns with many of the things that our research team is thinking about, and was just a lovely kind of setting for trying to think more deeply about engineering activities and how families work together to engage with them. So this project started in 2019, and it was originally a 3-year study funded by NSF, and then we were able to add on a supplement year. And the focus of this study is really looking very closely at the specific activities that we were using kind of in the broader Head Start engineering project that Scott mentioned. We had a chance to look very deeply and closely at how families were interacting with these activities, with the materials, with the design challenges that we were presenting with them, so that we could better design them for future experiences. And thinking about, you know, how can we introduce activities into the home where there's not a lot of, you know, there's no external facilitation. It's just the family kind of working together. So how do they get started with the activity? What engineering practices kind of emerge as they engage in these really fun and cute activities? And then, you know, how do they talk about it with each other kind of during and after? So originally, we were not going to be in the home setting. We were going to be within the Ready, Set, Go program, but this happened right around COVID. So we had this pivot towards just collecting data with the families in their homes. And that actually was just, you know, a phenomenal experience of trying to see to be invited into families' homes by them sharing their videos with us, you know, at their kitchen table, was a really powerful experience for us, and pushed our thinking about what engineering can look like in a variety of settings. We did get a year of supplemental funding to actually, now that places are more open, to go back into the Ready, Set, Go classroom and see how the early childhood educators there were adapting and using the activities in the classroom setting, because it's different than the home setting. So yeah, it's just been a really fantastic partnership with Metropolitan Family Service, and we have learned a lot from this project that will influence how we design our activities for families in the future. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Smila.
And I wanted to share a little bit about this other project called Diálogos. And so through our experience with families with Head Start on engineering and Ready, Set, Go engineering, REACH, we heard a lot from families about how they were using the engineering activities for other purposes other than just engaging their kids with engineering. A lot of the families appreciated the opportunities to work on social emotional skills and teaching their kids about handling strong emotions and frustration and things like that. And so we wanted to explore a little bit about how the activities could support executive function skills, social emotional skills as well. And so we have a 2-year project. It's a pilots and feasibility NSF ASIL project to do that. And inspired by Marta Civil's work. Marta, hi, she's here with us today. We decided to create these dialogue groups. We created 2. We had one with families from the Ready, Set, Go program, and we have one from our Head Start partners, where we had these opportunities to meet with families and create a collective space where we were all working together, highlighting the importance of dialogue and conversation. We wanted to all be learners in the space. We wanted to be supportive, and we wanted to be purposeful to explore the connections between engineering and executive function. And so we met virtually with families, because again, it happened during the pandemic, just to have the space. And just want to say that all the families we met with identify as Latinx or Latine. And we conducted everything in Spanish, which was a wonderful opportunity to talk to families and support our Latinx community. And so we created the space. We had a lot of conversations, and we learned about these ideas that were coming up from the connections between engineering and executive function. But most importantly, we heard about the goals and the values that families have related to their children's growth and development. We were able to see many, many examples of strengths and knowledge that families were bringing. If you're familiar with a lot of the executive function literature, a lot of it is deficit-based and highlights deficits that are present within communities, especially communities of color. And so through this project, we were able to really be able to lead with those assets and strengths and knowledge that families have. And right now we're particularly interested in understanding those assets that they're bringing. We're focused on resilience, which is an emergent theme from the conversations with parents about how resilience is something that they want to be able to teach their kids, and also is an asset that they're bringing, is a disposition that they're bringing into life and handling life's problems and challenges with this resilience. And so right now we're in the process of analyzing our data and being able to talk about how families are bringing in this resilience and how that resilience is connecting to both engineering and executive function. And so stay tuned. We're kind of wrapping up. We are at the last 6 months of the project, and we've learned so much from families that were eager to share with the field of educators and researchers.
Thank you, Smirla. Thank you, Gina. And seeing some good connections in the chat. Yeah, feel free to keep sharing things or posting questions. It was neat to see the connections to Head Start that folks have. And just as a side note, Courtney, you mentioned early Head Start. It's been really cool with several of our programs, Head Start and Ready, Set, Go, have early childcare or early intervention or early home visit programs. And we've primarily focused on like the 3, 4, 5 and up crowd, but it's been really neat to see them adapting some of these ideas around engineering to the little ones, which obviously is a different focus, but we've seen them connect with, just like we think about little kids as natural, like inquiring around the world, talk to families about how kids are natural problem solvers and testers, and making that connection to engineering. We've also seen them use that connection to socio-emotional learning with engineering to help to support young children, and just talk to families about how talking about science and engineering very early is just a great way to get those words and ideas and interests into like the family environment. And obviously many families are doing that already. So it's been cool to see them take that to the early years. All right, so like I said, keep sharing in chat or posting things. We're gonna start sharing some examples from these projects and get your feedback on things and your ideas. So next, we'd like to watch a video from one of the activities from the Head Start Engineering and Ready, Set, Go engineering project, and talk a little bit more about what we've learned specifically around designing engineering activities for families, like Gina was mentioning. So the video we're gonna show was captured by a family member on their phone during the Ready, Set, Go engineering project, where families were taking the activities home. This was during COVID. They were doing them on their own at home and videotaping them with their phones and then sharing those videos with us. So this activity is a version of what we call the Pollitos activity, which is Spanish for baby chickens, baby chicks, which is based on the song Los Pollitos Dicen, the baby chicks are singing, which some of you may have heard. I'm not going to sing it, but again, maybe we should get you to jump in here, Samira. So that's a very popular song in many Spanish-speaking countries. It's also a beautiful, very adorable song. So we've noticed all families really connect with it. So for this activity version that you'll see, families had wooden blocks and some cardboard rectangle pieces. And their engineering challenge or prompt was to build a structure to keep the chicken family safe and cozy, building off of that Los Pollitos Dicen song. So let's watch the video together, and then let's talk about what we notice. We'll have people post some thoughts in the chat. So as you're watching, I don't know, Smirla, if you're able to post some of these, think about what you noticed in general. Think about what stood out to you about how the family engages with the engineering design practices, engineering design process. and think about how the design of the activities and materials seem to impact the interaction. So a lot to think about there, but when we get back together, we'll kind of step through those different prompts. One thing also to note is when you watch the video, you'll see like a fade in the middle. We show a little bit of the beginning of the activity, and then there's a few minutes that we cut out, and then we go to another part of the interaction. All right. So this is the great part where Scott tests to see if he's able to do the things that worked well before, but never work well when you're actually.
This is where you want somebody else telling jokes, Scott.
I know, right? I'm trying to tell jokes while like doing the thing.
You got to get somebody else to do that work for
right.
you.
Good. Note for the future. All right. So feel free to turn it up a little bit if it's turn it up on your guys' sound if it's a little quiet.
¿Cómo crees que podrías tú construir un gallinero?
Primero, we have to make this thing.
Mira, te acuerdas de la canción que dice, los pollitos dicen, ellos dicen pío, pío, pío. cuando
Let's
tiene
sing a pío.
hambre.
Pío, 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 pío.
Ujú. Es cuando tienen hambre, cuando tienen frío. Su mamá les busca el maíz y el trigo y les da su comida. y
Baby,
les
I
presta
can use this room for a bed or something.
una cama.
Or I can be on top of here like a roof.
¿Y qué puedes hacer con esto? Mira.
Hey, there you go. I did it.
Ujú.
Now you have to
Se cae.
I know.
Quizás necesites otro aquí, quizás, para que esté más.
Hey, what about the other side?
Mira. Mucho balance. Oh. Balance.
Yes. See? Do we need blocks here to protect them from zombies?
¿No estás protegiendo de zombies? No creo que los pollitos conozcan a los zombies.
Well, I'm just pretending, Mommy.
Ujú.
Zombies are really bad things for little babies. Because what if they eat their brains?
Mm.
All animals have brains, even
Mm.
these ones.
Ujú.
And I used to people. La 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 la.
To be four again. So hopefully people could hear some of that. I didn't mention they've got these little wind up yellow baby chicks. Oh, Gina, thank you. Gina's showing the baby chicks that they had. So they had these little baby chicks that they could play with, and they didn't show it in this clip, but a lot of the stuff after they started to build this was to put the chicks inside, testing them, figuring out what they needed to build to protect them from the zombies, which I think was a detail that surprised the mom when it came up on camera. So let's post in chat. What are some of the things you guys noticed just watching the video? What stood out to you all? So people can post in chat, and then we don't have too big of a group. Does anyone want to unmute themselves as well and just share what they saw?
It was
Go ahead.
It was a good interaction between the mother and the kid. And what I like in that small video is how the mother contribute to the vocabulary developing also, and the interaction between the two languages.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah, we hear this again and again that families value these experiences for many goals. They value the engineering, but they also value it for many things, including other aspects of learning development, like vocabulary, like colors, like shapes. And as well, many bilingual families are specifically valuing the opportunity to speak Spanish and English and use the resources that are in both languages. So some folks are posting in the chat. The mom gave the child a chance to fail and then made the suggestions for improvement. Yes, there was a lot of starting some things and things falling apart. Anyone else want to unmute themselves and share something that they noticed?
I want to share that like the purposeful failure aspect in the way that when the girl put the little block thing in the tower fail, the mom didn't like jump in to fix it for her. She let the kid fix the tower, but then she mentioned the word balance as the kid was reconstructing. So it helped building that vocabulary. Like so what's interesting is that the mom was trying to introduce that concept of balance to the kid while she was doing or developing the balance thing on the tower.
Thank you, Ruth. We've heard from some families that learning about the engineering process can be freeing because they realize that planning and testing and improving are a natural part of the process, so they don't feel all this pressure to feel like they have to get to the right answer, or maybe the way they learned growing up in terms of like always being the parent who knows everything and is able to teach the children in a more direct way. So yeah, some of the families have felt really freed by that idea. It's like, I could just fail with my child and then we can try again. These are great stuff that's being posted in the chat. Let's also talk about, what did you notice about the engineering here? Did anything stand out about the engineering that you all saw in the video? Some of you have already talked obviously about failure and then trying again. What else?
I liked her process, like right away when the story kind of started, the little girl grabbed that basket. She's like, a bed or a roof over the head. And then like, it goes to showing the blocks, but it shows that her process, like she was already planning. She was already thinking.
Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, that's actually something we learned quite a bit from parents about and families about the way they like to naturally structure these engineering engagement. They often like to spend a lot of time just exploring the nature of the materials. And so we, in fact, restructured our instructions and our kind of facilitation guides to mirror that, to give them to really give them permission to have space to explore the narrative context and the materials before they felt pressure to jump right into an engineering design challenge. And that seemed to really both align with the way they like to do it and be a very productive way of structuring that engineering process for families with young kids. Yeah, Becky, the materials, I mean, colored blocks, like you really can't lose. They're intuitive. They provide a lot of feedback when, things don't balance or whatever, but they're also doable for small hands. So I think those materials were a lot easier to work with than some of the other activities we had where we had to play around with materials.
They're familiar with them. And just at least something I've noticed in my own work is that familiarity, like when kids are interacting with materials they are already familiar with, maybe in collusion with things they're not familiar with, like that. It just takes away a barrier to participation. They're like, oh, I already know ways that I can use this. And it seemed really evident in this video.
Agree. Did anyone else notice anything that jumped out to you about the engineering?
I have a question as a non-engineer.
Yes, please, Marta.
Did I miss something? Why was she trying to do the double deck or whatever? What was she trying to do? The structure to protect the pollitos. Is there something that I missed at the beginning that, she put the blocks, then she puts the cover, then she puts blocks, then she's going to put another cover?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, because you guys didn't have like all the information about like the activity guide and stuff like that. So I probably should have shared more. So they got the general context of creating something, like you said, that's like safe and cozy for the baby chicks. But there are also some images on the activity guide, including one that showed some columns and some structures. And in fact, that's something we iterated on because we noticed that young kids can be pretty literal when they see pictures. We love providing examples for families so they feel comfortable and can build on, but we also are careful when it's like too much or they feel like this is the right answer that we have to build. So in this example, they had a picture that showed the blocks with that structure. In the future versions, we actually went a little less literal, where they got a picture of a chicken coop that was more illustrative. And we noticed that probably because of your point, Becky, that blocks were already pretty familiar, that families still could build, but they didn't always build the same thing based on the picture. I don't know if that answers your question, Marta, or if you have other thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was not the image that I have of a chicken coop.
Yeah, right.
Not that I'm an expert on chicken coops as an urbanite, but I thought, okay, it's not what would have come naturally to me to build for the chickens. I mean, I don't know what I would have done, but not, like this. So that's why I was curious.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. And some families, I feel like, had more direct experience with chickens to draw on as they were designing. In this case, another thing you didn't see here is that quickly the daughter talked about the pollitos as princes and princesses pollitos. So she had this castle idea, and then you saw her bring in the idea of the zombies.
Zombies, yeah.
And like, as Smirla's posting here, once you get into zombies, can zombies climb? You better make it tall. Like, so there were some other, and what we started calling that expanding the design space, expanding the problem space, because it was this unique way that families use their imagination to push on our original design challenge in ways that connected better with their interests and imagination.
Scott, would it be helpful? I pulled up the round 3 activity guide for pollitos. Do you want me to show it quickly, or would that be distracting?
Yeah. Why don't you post it up so you can see kind of what we were working with and what we've continued to iterate on.
Okay.
Also the song.
Mm-hmm.
The song is mentioning something about the pollitos, the place where they live, they eat, they are they need to be covered, etc. So that's the idea of building a house or something like that.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Jose. Yeah, that brought a lot. And some families, especially that knew the song well, really connected with that and brought that into the play. And what Gina's showing here is you can see, this is the English version, the Spanish version was in the back. You can see how the design prompt, there's the Spanish version. The design prompt's really prominent on the top. On the left side, vamos a explorar, let's explore, is prompting families with ideas about how to explore the materials. And then on the right side, let's design. And you can see, like Gina was saying, this was the round 2 iteration, not the final one. And there's that structure with blocks and actual boards there that the girl was copying and expanded on. And then in later versions, we changed that up so that there was a little bit more freedom for them to decide how they wanted to build. Thanks, Gina. Any other, I saw Ruth, you unmuted. Do you want to jump in? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just saw you unmuted. You're muted now.
Yes, it was something related to what Marta was talking about. So was there a reason, because she started with a basket, like the material of a basket, and then she wanted to do something on the basket, and then when the mom mentioned, do you know how to build a gallinero? In my brain, because I do have chickens at home, and I have a gallinero made out of the malla, and it's just one floor. So when it came to the building a 2-floor structure, that was when I said, okay, what happened between the first type of materials that the girl was trying to build that, so later can go to a different type of materials.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys probably know, designing programs and testing programs and changing programs, there's always things that you're thinking about, like, how are families using this? How could we improve it? In an earlier version of the activity, it was a little bit more focused on protecting a nest. And so there were little huevos, there were little eggs, and they would put the eggs in the nest, and they would build a tower that could hold the nest and protect it. And actually, in one iteration, there was a fox, and there was a fox that was 1 foot high, and they had to build a tower to protect the nest from the fox. And there were actually a lot of cool things about that design. I think there's a lot of ways you could go with this activity. In this iteration that you see, the nest was a little bit of a holdover from the old version. We ended up taking it out and focusing just on those little pollitos, those baby stuffed animals, which were so engaging for families, and also allowed families to both like push their imagination, but also test their structures physically by like putting them in. Would it hold it? Was it big enough? So there was a lot of engagement there. So there's, Jose, to your question, we're going to share a bunch of resources at the end, including links to some of those PDFs. So you'll have all that available. Let me just, before we transition to the next example, you guys are getting at something that's so interesting to us about what are the materials and activity sort of design principles that seem to be promising for supporting families and supporting engineering. So let me just share a few of those, if I can, and what we've been learning. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of ideas about this as well in your own context. So these are just some things that our research has been highlighting. You can see here, here's the picture of the Pollitos activity. In this iteration, there was a storyboard that was aligned with the Pollitos Dicen song. But here's some things we've noticed. One, the material selection, something you guys have been talking about, is so critical. We've particularly been thinking about the open-ended nature of those materials. Are they open-ended enough so that they allow multiple solutions to the design challenge? We've also been thinking about the flexibility. Do they allow for families to adapt it to their own interests, but also to different ability levels? You know, the difference between a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old can be very large at this age, you know. Level of difficulty, and then also the nature of the feedback. You know, the blocks are a great example of this because the blocks are doable for young kids, but they also give immediate feedback. If that structure is not balanced, it falls over, and then they're like, oh, I have to change something because something wasn't quite working right. Another thing we've been focused on is that story and narrative, which we found over and over again is a really powerful part supporting the engineering, especially for families with young children. So we always try to include these narrative contexts and stories. Sometimes they're actual storybooks. In this case, it was a book, but that had the words to the Los Pollitos Dicen song. And we've been studying how that supports engineering engagement, and even more specifically, how it supports user-centered design, which is basically, you know, the children and the family thinking about that user, thinking about the pollitos in this case, and how to make the design perfect for that person. And so when you create a story around that, they really latch on to that and think about all the ways, not just physically, is this a good structure for the chicks, but can we protect them from zombies? Can it be more comfortable? They need a kitchen, and they really expand on it and push those engineering iterations. And then the last thing we've been thinking about is the design challenge itself. How do we present design challenges that connect with family interests and leverage the ways that families naturally orient to the materials? I mentioned that originally we had that fox, and we had the eggs. The eggs turned out to be kind of a hazard because kids just like to throw them all over the room. But also we had the Pollitos Dicen song sort of as a side connection, and families valued that connection so much that it ended up becoming a central part of the activity. So we really were following the lead of the families to think about what's most important to them, how are they using the materials. Before I turn it over, I'll just show you, these are in the Ready, Set, Go engineering project. These were the 3 activities themselves. Another great example of following the family's lead is on the right, you'll see this activity, a tacos activity, where families were thinking about engineering process as they were planning a party, a taco party for families and friends. When we originally created this activity, we had a timer in there, and we said, what process can you as a family use to make as many tacos as possible in 1 minute? Families did not really care about the timer. They really just loved that playful experiences of assembling tacos, thinking about a party. And so we went there, and we found ways to build the engineering into the ways they naturally wanted to use the materials. So let me get out of there. And let's transition to the next example. Gina, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. That was a super fun discussion, and I think glimpse into some of the amazing video that we've had with families. So this next section of our session, we wanted to introduce to you one of the resources that we have developed. Originally, it was for a method to introduce families to engineering that wasn't us basically giving them a PowerPoint presentation at a in-person workshop. So as we were thinking about how do we provide families with just an early taste of what engineering might be, as they start to engage in these activities, we wanted to think of a dynamic way to introduce them to it. So we actually created this video, which we'll put up in a moment here. And it was, again, just originally for one project. And then we saw it being taken up by families with a lot of positivity and kind of excitement. So then we used it for another project, and then we started to use it for early childhood educators. And now we just try to send it to anyone who's like, well, how do you guys think about engineering? And one of the things that we really tried to capture in this video, which I will fully admit, I shot by myself with my iPad taped to the wall of my office during COVID. And so it's not, perhaps it doesn't have the highest production value in terms of the actor who's in it. And I will just say that caveat. But we tried to really embed in there our team's approach of engineering is a thing that everyone can engage in, and you probably already engage in it in the ways that you just interact with the world and try to approach problems. So what we would love for you to do is to take, when you are watching this video, which Scott will show in a moment, here are the questions that we'd love for you to think about. We're going to send you into small groups like after we watch the video, but here's what we'd like you to think about as you view it. So what connections did you see between the video and your own everyday problem solving? And how might these ideas connect with the families you want to work with? So with that, Scott, we can show the video and then we'll send you with some directions to your breakouts. Hello, my name is Dr. Gina, and I'm a professor of STEM education at the University of Notre Dame. I'm also part of the Head Start on Engineering project team. Today, I want to talk to you about one of my most favorite things, engineering. And, of course, I want to talk about some of my all-time favorite people, engineers. Engineers are people who make things that solve problems. And the way that they solve problems is by creating something called a design. A design is a specific solution to a particular problem. So, for example, let's imagine your friend Sonia loves bedtime, but when she goes to sleep, she moves around a lot. And when this happens, her sheet always comes off of her bed. And this is super frustrating for her. An engineer, who happens to be Sonia's mom, might come in and say, what's going on here? What are some things we can do to try and keep Sonia's sheet on her bed? It's not like she's gonna stop moving around, so we probably should figure out a way to keep the sheet steady on its own. What can we do? After thinking about it and talking with Sonia, the engineer decides to clip the sheet to the bed. Then, she and Sonia realize that their design can be improved. So they make some changes, and now the solution works even better. Engineers love coming up with lots of designs when they're trying to solve problems. When an engineer encounters a challenge that needs a solution, they go through something called the engineering design process, or the EDP, as we like to call it, to help them figure it out. Let's check it out. There are about a gazillion different ways to talk about the steps of the EDP, but for today, we're going to focus on 5. First, the ask step. This is where you ask questions to understand the problem and what you need to solve it. Next, the imagine step. This is where you brainstorm as many possible solutions and designs as you can. Next is the plan step. This is where you pick a design and decide how you will use your materials. Next is the create step. This is where you build and test your design to see how well it solves the problem. Engineers love, love, love testing out their design ideas so they can learn about them and keep improving them. And finally, the improve step. This is where you make changes to your design based on what you learned. So, armed with the EDP, engineers can do some amazing things. They can figure out how to send someone into space. They can figure out how to make something really tiny and then stick it in a cell phone. Or they can use that really teeny tiny thing and put it into something that can help cure someone who might not be feeling good. Engineers also do things like design processes for packaging up your favorite foods or designing new materials to make your favorite toy even better. But did you know that people all around you every single day use the engineering design process? Like when the grown-ups in your family figure out how to get everyone organized and ready in the morning to get to school and get to work, or when families, like the one I grew up in, need something in their house and they design a unique piece of furniture just for their own home. Or when kids work together using some of their toys to design a solution to a problem that they're having. You know what? I bet you do engineering every day. In all of these cases, everyday folks saw a challenge, took some time to think about it and come up with an idea for how to solve it. They tried something out, and then they learned and observed and ended up improving their design, and their solution worked even better. And all along the way, they hit the different steps of the EDP. So, what should we remember from this video? Great question. How about this? Number 1, engineers are folks who solve problems using the EDP. Number 2, the EDP can happen a lot of different ways, but a common way it unfolds is using the 5 steps we talked about today. Ask, imagine, plan, create, and improve. And number 3, engineering happens all around us. Everyday people do engineering when they take on tricky problems and figure out really creative ways to solve them. We hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for learning with us today on the Head Start on Engineering project. Okay, well, that was only mildly embarrassing, I think. But so what we'd like you to do now is we are going to send you into one of 4 breakout rooms. Thanks, everybody. All credit goes to my daughter, Sonia, who's now older and would never want to act in a video that her mom is making. So what we are going to do is I'm going to drop one more link here into the chat. This is an interactive Google slide deck that you can click into. And when you are in your breakout rooms, what we would love is for you to just find whatever breakout room number you are assigned to, and then just capture a couple thoughts in response to each of these questions. And then that way, if we're running short on time or we don't have a ton of time for whole group share out, or you just want to look back at what people said, you can look at the ideas that are captured here. So it looks like lots of folks are popping in to the Google Doc, which is great. What I'll try to do now is let's see here. Let me just add you to, here we go. Try to even out the numbers a little bit. We'll spend about, let's say about 10 to 12 minutes in these groups. And then if folks need a little bit more time, we can certainly add a little bit more to just have a conversation about what you saw in the video, how it connected to like your own work and your own problem solving, how it might be useful for the families that you work with, and then just whatever else you want to talk in your small groups. So I will send you all away now, and then we'll see you in a little bit. Okay. Well, thank you all for being great sports about flying through Zoom space and filling out. There's some great things in these slides. It's very exciting. I guess we'll just take a moment. Did anyone have a highlight or kind of an aha moment during your conversation that perhaps you'd be willing to share with the group?
Actually, I have a question I want to bring back to your team that came up in our small group. And that was about why why is knowing what engineering is important for families? Why is that a key thing we want families to take away from this?
Yeah, I think so. I can start, but certainly others should feel free to chime in. In the context of our projects, I think having, Head Start in Engineering and Ready, Set, Go Engineering, they are intentionally oriented towards engineering. So having a shared understanding with the families around what engineering is certainly one of the goals of doing that. I think also just providing families with a different vision for what engineering might be, and making it more approachable and accessible could potentially lead to them being more open about talking about these types of things as their children continue to go through school. And when they hear about, here's an engineering after school program or something like that, and they might just feel like it's something that they are familiar with and can resonate with. And, so it's also kind of geared towards a longer play. It's not just like that they have to know what the definition of engineering is. Scott, Smila, anything I'm missing there?
I think that's great. I mean, this is something we talk about a lot, Sandra, and also striking that balance between honoring and elevating what families are already doing and sharing what we can and learning from them. Another thing I would just add is that many families seem to appreciate having a word to organize some of these things that they're learning about and connecting with their own skills and experiences. So families will say, we are already problem solvers and now we call it engineering, and we talk about it as home as engineering, and we talk about the problem solving we do. And as a parent, I want to teach those problem solving skills to my kids, and I can use the engineering design process to label that. And so it becomes like an organizing way that they can talk about the things that were already important to them or that they're already doing. So I think that's another reason.
Thank you so much. Other highlights, insights, ideas that struck you from your conversations?
I just wanted to make a point. I shared this in our group, but I just like how in the video it essentially simplified the idea of engineering design, because I think sometimes people think it's this big, we're designing a bridge, we're building a roller coaster. It's this huge thing that's really intense and invasive, when really it actually, fixing the bed, or figuring out how to get more out of the toothpaste that's almost empty, or there's just these everyday things that we go through in life. And I think depicting that along with your child was just really empowering, inspiring, and eye-opening, because I think people will be like, oh my gosh, what, that's engineering design? It's not these huge things that people make those connections to. So I appreciated that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think this has been an ongoing and truly emergent part of our work, is really thinking about how do we present to families an invitation to engage with these ideas around engineering in a way that can empower them, and just seeing, that they are already engaging in it, and it's not something for someone else. It's something that they're already doing. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts?
Yes. In my case, for example, years ago, when I started introducing STEM, as we usually do, we prepare the PowerPoint, and the title was STEM or STEAM now, no? And we start explaining what does mean each part. But I saw the faces of the families, that they were, oh my God, mathematics, technology. They got a little bit scared. So now what I do is, first, I start playing with them and doing examples of what we are doing every day, So during a 20 minutes, we do examples about science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but I didn't mention in any moment STEM. So at the end, when I ask them, what do you think about that? Oh yeah, that's what we do every day, Okay, fantastic. Now, let's say what does mean STEM. And we start making the comparison. So the idea is totally different. And the same way about the engineering process, you know, if we start saying the engineering process, some of the people say, well, I'm no engineer, or the children, I don't want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor. Oh, you know, the doctors use the engineering process too, you know, when they ask the patient, what are you feeling, then imagine what is going on, then the planning to operate or give some kind of medicines. Same thing when moms is going to prepare tortillas or something like that, you know, they ask what we have in the pantry, etc. And so we are engineers, you know, in the sense. So that's my way to introduce that, no stray to the, you know, acronyms or these big, you know, concepts. First, I go through the whatever we do in the daily basis, and then say, oh, look, this is the engineering process.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think what you're really highlighting for me is, you know, we to get funding from the National Science Foundation in the engineering directorate, you have to like make, you know, this, you have to say that what you're doing is to try to build this understanding and interest in engineering, and that could lead someone to a career down the road. That is one thing. But what we really try to foreground is that engineering is a way of thinking and kind of engaging with the world. And even if a kid is not necessarily seeing an engineering career as their pathway, there's still a lot of value in helping a child and a family see that what they're doing is connected to something called engineering, and that they can engage in it even without kind of a, you know, a formalized degree, and like in years and years of training. Certainly some kids, you know, we hope maybe they'll be interested in it down the road, but it is not our only goal for families, for and their children.
One of the analogies I often use, Gina, to prove that point is I tell people, like, you know, I am not a doctor, but as a mom, I absolutely need to know how to recognize certain symptoms that my children are ill. Like, I need to know how to use a thermometer. I need to know if this is right. And similarly, I'm not a doctor. I need to be able to problem solve as a human, but I'm not an engineer necessarily. So I often use that analogy of like everyday things that we do and just have to know to be around our families as an analogy. And actually, I'll just point out, Randy actually pointed this out in our group, same thing, that he, as a parent of older children, young adults, that he is admiring his kids' planning skills these days and acknowledging that those very closely resemble EDPs.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, little Sonia there just started middle school, and kind of the way that she's organizing her middle school life is, yeah, it resonates with that. So I think this is lovely. We have everything in the slides, so you all can revisit that down the road. We'll kind of lock those so that other folks don't edit them on accident, so your ideas will be preserved there. But one thing we did want to share, and Scott, if you could just pop that last slide up, some of the things that may be helpful to you all, particularly as you consider how to implement some of these ideas, like in your own work and your own programs. We just have these 4 tips for thinking about program design if it's focused on engineering. We spent a lot of time today thinking about how do we frame engineering, like how do we introduce people to it, how do we make it inviting. And so I think that's certainly something that we always continue to think about as we start new engineering initiatives. I think these flexible home-based activities that you saw the example of, the, you know, the little chicks and the blocks and the cardboard, and we're just using like everyday materials that have a lot of flexibility. And that allows not only for just like extended play and extended design thinking, but it also allows for many members of the household to participate. So we didn't see this in the video today, but we do have others where siblings come in, or there are multiple adults that are engaging with the child. And so the flexibility of those activities and those materials can really create an environment that affords more people in the family to engage. I think these strategies for connecting families to each other is great if your program allows that. just having, parents talk with parents about ideas they have to have families do activities in the same physical space if possible. There's always some great kind of ideas sparked by looking at other families engaging in their work. We've also done this virtually as well. We've had some online workshops in the evenings for families, and those have been really fun. But the ways in which families can share their designs and talk about their designs and just kind of connect with each other around engineering is something that is increasingly a consideration that we have in our work. And lastly, again, working especially with early childhood audiences that have such a natural lean towards inquiry, building on inquiry and showing the connections between engineering and inquiry can really be a fun and exciting pathway, particularly for early childhood educators and certainly learners. So we just leave you with those. And with that, I'll turn it over to Scott to wrap things up for us.
Thank you, Gina. So our time is coming to an end. This has been great. Thank you all for being willing to come in the middle of the day and share your experiences as well. We want to share a few resources with you and then we'll have some time if there's any questions or additional thoughts. And hopefully, Becky, we can share these in some different way too, but Smirla can post things in the chat. We have a couple of project websites that a lot of this stuff is freely available. So the Head Start in Engineering website is a good place to go. That everyday engineering video and other resources connected to presenting engineering related to everyday problem solving are on that website. One thing, in addition to some of those activities that are like those take-home activities that we showed, we worked closely with Gina and her team to develop a separate set of activities called Sparks activities that are more just kind of the seed of an idea of an engineering activity using everyday materials. And we've used those pretty successfully, somewhat with families, but even more with teachers who are looking for ideas to bring engineering. And Gina's showing that we've got these little printed cards that people have really enjoyed. So those are freely available on the website. Ready, Set, Go Engineering has its own website too. And you can see on there's a great educator guide that the team put together that was specifically designed for our partner, Metropolitan Family Service, but I think can be useful elsewhere. And we worked with their staff in thinking about the ways they adapted the activities to their families and to their kids, and to Gina's point about how they built on their strong focus on science inquiry to then integrate engineering into that process. And then the project that Smirla has been the lead on, Dialogos, just recently was featured on one of the NSF centers, the Revise Center. So there's a great spotlight there. We're working on a website for that project, so we'll have more to share soon. But obviously, you can email Becky and get in touch with us if there's anything you saw today that you want access to. It's, again, all free. And then the last thing we'll just highlight is a lot of the work we've been doing has been within the Center for Equitable Family STEM Learning. And so you can find connections to the projects through that website, and also our evolving ideas about families and the unique ways that families learn together, and the publications we've had coming out of these projects. So